Hey, my name is Kelly Kessler. I'm the host of the podcast Rewiring Health, and I'm obsessed with helping you stop feeling burnout, living in pain, and anxious about the future. You see, for years, I felt like I was never good enough. I repeated in my head, when I accomplish this, then I'll finally be happy. And even when I accomplished it, there was always emptiness in my heart. I always put others' needs before my own. Negative thoughts ran wild in my head, and I always struggled to truly feel like I could relax and be present. Well, through my journey of healing, rewiring my brain, regulating my nervous system, and reprogramming my subconscious mind, I have recovered from an eating disorder, I have healed from chronic back pain, and I can truly be present with my two boys and feel that I am living the life I was destined to live with purpose and with joy. And I'm here to guide you along the same journey of healing. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. When I struggled with feeling like I was never enough and attached my worth to my accomplishments, I didn't know where to begin. And the last thing I wanted as a high achiever and a perfectionist was someone telling me I need to overhaul my life because I already felt overwhelmed. So that's why I created this free daily checklist to get your nervous system back on track and start feeling free in your mind and body and stop feeling burnout. Grab it in the link below and enjoy. If you've ever struggled with feeling like you're not enough or that you're not worthy, or you struggle with how your body feels or looks, this is the episode for you. I had the pleasure of speaking with Katherine Jansen Burkett. She is an author, speaker, educator, and licensed professional counselor with over 20 years of clinical experience. Her current work follows her first career in public health. Prior to becoming a therapist, she obtained her Master of Public Health from the University of Washington and enjoyed many years of working on the issues of teen pregnancy, violence prevention, and community wellness. But at 39 years old, she got a flirt from the universe, a calling of sorts to become a therapist in the footsteps of her father. What came next was a master's degree from Lewis and Clark College and a private practice where she offers individual, couples, group, and retreat services. She is dedicated to personal growth, relational transformation for herself and for others, and focuses on aspects of wakefulness that include cherishing the body, reclaiming intrinsic worth, cultivating conscious relationships, and embracing death and dying. All right, welcome to another episode of Rewiring Health. Very excited to be joined by Katherine Jansen Burkett. So thank you so much for joining me today, Katherine.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too, definitely. And I want to just jump right into it because I'd love to hear people's journeys and what brought them to what they're doing today, and the trials, tribulations, and the things that we learn, and all those struggles that bring us tremendous beauty. Do you mind just sharing what brought you to what you do today and the people that you help?
Yes, and I appreciate the question. It has been a beautiful but very powerful and at sometimes very difficult journey. This is actually a second career, even though I'm 22 years into this career as a psychotherapist in private practice. And I come from a tradition of therapists. My father was a therapist as well. But this journey of writing the book and the work I really bring forward has been as much about my own healing and the journey of kind of restoring a sense of wellness and health at a lot of different levels, actually, not just physically, but including physically. So I was a kid who had a great childhood. Sadly, my dad left at 14. We didn't know it at the time, but basically he was kind of masking alcoholism. So I didn't see anything horrible, except when he left, he kind of said to my sister and I, the two remaining kids at home, I'm leaving the whole family, which is not what you tell children. So the whole idea of, kids kind of take things personally was literally delivered to me. So I had been struggling with an eating disorder prior to that. What became an eating disorder, and then food addiction and bulimia, to the point of a very dark time. By 16, I was really struggling even to go to school. I weighed way more than my natural body weight, and I attempted suicide, and I didn't obviously succeed at that. So there was an existential moment in the hospital. I was kind of by myself going, I'm not okay, but what I'm doing, I've got to do something different. So actually quit high school, went to San Francisco from a small town in Oregon, worked in the travel business a little bit, began to kind of heal from the inside out, which again is kind of the journey I teach people. My body, my heart, my relationships, in particular, my relationship to myself. And I was my first career in public health and health. I didn't see that I was going to be a therapist. I just used therapy very much to kind of rebuild my own wholeness. But then at about 39 years old, I was at a retreat and they said, "Do you have a dream that's trying to happen?" And I did not see this coming. And I heard a little intuitive flirt of like, "You need to be a therapist." And I already had a master's degree at that point. I had an established career in Portland, Oregon at the county health department. So it took me by surprise, and I'm just very grateful for it now. So going to school here in Oregon, and, excuse me, and then really bringing to my clients a lot of the teachings and work that were given to me and trying to kind of help them find whatever pieces, not necessarily that I share a lot, but that I use my work as inspiration to offer that same kind of path to others.
Mhm. Oh, well, thank you for sharing your story and everything you went through, because it is tremendous to see that transformation from going to from such a terrible, awful, dark place to now the place where you can help people. And what a gift to all those people that you've helped, because you know what they're feeling and you have an innate ability to
Yes.
have that compassion for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I choose in therapy land, you don't want to process, of course, your own stuff. But what I also do share, and I think it's actually quite therapeutic and important, is say somebody dropped out of high school. They would not know that I did that because I had to obviously go back and establish two different careers. But sharing that just levels the playing field. It creates a kind of safety. Same thing with my struggles with my body. I'm healthy now, but it has been such a journey to, as we might talk about, cherish my body and heal my body. As my disordered eating was ultimately a trauma response. So I will share that this health, hasn't always been my state. And just having it be not only I don't judge, but I really do know some of that darkness in a very firsthand way is super helpful for folks. It's our journey with our bodies or our overall wellness, but it is a very lonely, it's a very isolated place, it's a very shame-based place. So anything we can do to undo shame is critical.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. I went through very similar things going through bulimia in my late teens, early 20s, and it is absolutely so lonely going through that and trying to transition your mind from basically harming yourself to a place where you're supposed to love it. It's a huge leap, it feels like at that time. So completely, I understand that battle. Absolutely. Do you mind sharing your journey of how you got to a place where you could start cherishing your body, and what did that look like as you went along the process?
Well, because of Western culture as well, not just my trauma, package all that together. And I just thought I needed to get on a diet, and then I needed to tell myself to love myself. What I didn't understand, because I had really great therapists along the way and helpers, but the kind of work I do, I didn't understand that the response of my trauma created a core belief about myself of being unlovable because my father left. I wasn't lovable enough to keep him. I didn't know I was competing with alcoholism, and unworthy. I didn't matter enough. So it's an unworthy place, a worth place, as well as an unlovability place. So the battle was, loathing the body I had because I was told it was shameful and ugly by cultural standards and had that going on. But then trying to fix it was like this top-down approach, just do something different. And then a lot of shame when I wouldn't do it. What I now believe is my body needed me to accept my body as a beautiful extension of a humanness, which is a physical self, as a starting place, which was deeply frightening when I was quite overweight. And so that cherishing the body is really kind of, again, an inside out place. But I had to ultimately do psychotherapy and pretty deep dive into the beliefs that would stand in the way of me cherishing my body. It's like math, you know, you can't just get to the other side of the equation. And people get really frustrated with themselves. And then that's very unhelpful, that frustration and self-criticism. So you know, being in San Francisco without a car, there's lots of hills. So I was actually walking a lot, and I began to be like, okay, I feel a little more in my skin. But there was a point at which, having tried to do these crazy diets, of like, I just kind of got it. Like, this maybe is my body. And it was almost like in that deep peace and acceptance and loving myself and knowing that what my dad did had nothing to do with my worth or lovability. Then I did want to do good things for my body, rather than I would love my body conditionally after it got to a certain weight or fitness level. So like I say, somewhat in my book, but it's not a memoir, but definitely sharing with you and others, clients, if it's helpful to them, that this is for some of us quite a process to come to this place of cherishment. And then even for those that are dealing with disordered eating, or like you and I struggle with body image stuff, maybe we're also ageist in this culture. So if you don't do the heavy lifting through this process, Kelly, then at some point you're going to be dealing with, again, a society that says you are unattractive if you have wrinkles. You are unattractive if it's just the, you know, so I share with people this relationship to our body, though we're not only our body, is going to serve a lifetime of moments. You know, what if somebody can't have a baby? What if you hit menopause? You know, all the different ways our bodies are changing and dynamic.
Yeah, it's such an important point there, because it is so true. We all try to fill our soul with everything external to us. And it's literally a losing battle, because there's always going to be someone or something saying that you're not enough. And until we start feeling whole within us, then nothing will ever fill that void. And that, I think, is the biggest lesson that so many people can take today, especially after we've just gone through a pandemic and life is just up in, you know, everything seems chaotic around us. And if we're waiting for things to change outside of us, we're just going to be sitting here waiting our whole life. And you're never going to feel that feeling that you desire so much. And it does start from within us. And I just
well, thank you. And you know what I also didn't understand until I was more in the process of doing this work. And my practice is really empowering people with psychoeducation. I don't think, I mean, therapy is great when you hold space and you empathize, but if you don't teach people, and I having had to learn as well, how it is all working internally. So there's this idea of parts work where so the 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 4-year-old, children have to go outside of themselves as part of developing a sense of self. That's why it's so dangerous if we don't have environments or people or situations that give us what we need, because we're literally in a petri dish of creating a belief system. And so when we hit adulthood with the scar tissue of having not gotten all that validation, at that point, the world can't really give it to us. I mean, we can go every day and get a bunch of likes on social media or have somebody say they love us, but I fashion it like a cup, that we fill that cup, but it's got holes at the bottom. So every day we have to go and we'll get something and it'll temporarily feel good. And then we can exhale. I am complete. I am enough. But then the pressure to always be seeking. So the parts work is the idea that there's a part of us when we get confused, when we're insecure, that I can know, adult Catherine can know. And even if that 14-year-old, what I call, comes online, I can just love her and say, it's okay that you forget that it's not about you and it's not your fault. And you wonder if you're good enough. I know you're good enough. So then the source of what I was looking for externally actually does live inside of us. And it frees our partners, even our children. It frees my clients from needing to, people who might buy my, like, the world is not supposed to tell me I'm enough. And it won't sometimes, you know, I won't matter to everybody, you know, or whatever that will be. And that gets to be okay. We don't have to be perfect anymore. I know you focus on perfectionism, like our anxiety goes down because, again, we're not always looking outside of ourselves for something that is not sustainably offered.
Oh, absolutely. And it is so important to understand. I really feel like it's like our soul's journey. Like once you get to that point, it's like you open up your whole world to new opportunities, new possibilities, and you literally see life through a different lens. Even if things are the same, you still see it differently. And you can start being
Yes.
grateful for those hardships because it formed you into this life where you have this ability to see things differently. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm glad you see it that way. It's hard for those of us that have, I wasn't abused. I did not have a parent die early, although he pretty much left, and there was definitely some abandonment stuff. People have even more intense trauma. And I remember this was not a client, but at a retreat I went to one time, and this man was describing like torture, kind of like really, really intense stuff. And I kind of was sympathetic, and he didn't appreciate that. Actually, he was like, I would not be who I am today without it. And I attempted suicide, so some people don't make it to the other side. They can't fashion enough outer support, like in a human way, not validation stuff, but just not being alone, or just don't give it enough time to be able to see that, oh my God, I wouldn't really change anything, though I really care about this kid and younger woman that went through a lot of tough stuff for sure. But yeah, to your point, I think if we can really claim all of it as a part of the journey that is unique and tough, but not only beautiful, but can be transformative and can actually help other people, that can be huge.
Absolutely. And for somebody who's maybe listening and is hearing this, but they're maybe still in a really tough, dark place, and they really don't even feel like they have any compassion for themselves, where would you say to start doing that, start feeling that if you're kind of in that like survival mode at this point?
Mm-hmm. Well, so if I really practice and bring into my sessions kind of mindfulness, because some of us are meditators, but not everybody's a meditator. But that's a scary thing, Kelly. If we get quiet, sometimes we're bombarded with thoughts. We're flooded by self-criticism or just a busy mind with a to-do list. But if we can hang in there and learn how to be in quietness, even if there's a part of us wanting to be compassionate towards ourselves, we're not there yet, but I want that. That's actually the beginning of a little flame, a little pilot light of love, right?
Yeah.
The fact that I feel thirsty right now, I'm gonna go ahead and get myself a drink. It's weird, like that's love, that's nourishing, that's connection, actually. And so just the wanting it to be different, I think is a really great place to start. And that even our physical body, when you think it's streaming with all this intelligence that is fighting diseases and keeping us alive and giving us energy, even if we don't sleep well last night, or amazing. I did an anatomy and physiology class for my first journey and being in healthcare. And I remember thinking, this is the most spiritual class I've ever been to. Right. Oh my goodness, what is happening all the time, the intelligence of that. So I think it's our thought that says, I don't love myself versus I don't feel a love for myself right now, but maybe there's something already here. And mindfulness is not about creating something new as much as the idea that we wouldn't cry for food if we didn't have inborn love. Would be a baby that decided I was too colicky, so I don't deserve to eat, so I won't cry. You know what I mean? No, there's just this, there's that presence. It's present. So that's where I would start with people. And secondly, what I'm called to offer is, I wish I don't need it now, but like my 50-year-old self, or right now my 60-year-old self, or even my 30-year-old self could talk to that 16-year-old and go, sweetie, hang in there. It's going to get a lot better. And that doesn't make it an easy day. But a sense of a future self talking to our current self can be really powerful.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It just gives you that perspective, because sometimes when you're going through it, it feels like it's the end of something, but in a big way, when you have a perspective, it's actually the beginning of something. And it's hard to see that when you're stuck kind of in that moment.
That's right. That's
yeah.
right.
And I just love how you talk about, how there's other ways other than meditation, because it's true. A lot of people struggle with that meditation, especially if you have a very negative, active mind. But to say that, there's so many actionable steps, like you shared, there's a lot you can do just to start now, and start as small as you need to. And I just love the examples that you gave.
Thank you. Yeah. Mindfulness, it's being present to what is right now. And so even if we've been avoiding things, you can see why people don't sit still very much, because everything catches up. And then I try to, get ahead of it again. And then it catches up when I get quiet or in the middle of the night. And so to get quiet is not always blissful. The things that are actually deeply yearning for our attention are kind of like, oh, Kelly's sitting down. We've got her attention. And that's why, and in my book, my first aspect of wakefulness was relationship to self, befriending you. But the very second one was freedom from the mind, because our mind is so powerful in terms of, as soon as I sit down, it will either be a negative thought or it will be a to-do list thing for many people. So we have to begin to say, oh, there is my awareness and me, and then there's a mind. And by the way, it's actually not even telling me truthful things. It's inaccurate, like a crazy amount of the time. The research would show us that thoughts are actually either wholly untrue or partially untrue, or even outdated, just outdated. And so to have a thought and go, okay, thought, kind of like it has to get vetted before I take it in. You can be any thought, right? Life isn't worth living. Okay, that's just a sentence, right? I get to decide whether I believe that. I get to get curious about, where did that thought come from? What does it really need? So I teach that kind of relationship to that, like our body, having a relationship to our body, having a relationship to our mind, so that you're not kind of at the mercy of your thoughts and thought patterns.
So important. And think until you start questioning those things that, we do take them as gospel, like, well, of course it's gotta be true. It's coming through my head, but we don't realize that like 95% of our thoughts are programmed in our childhood. And so that's just the operating system we're running on. Exactly. And unfortunately too, the way our brains are wired, they're wired to protect us. So what's going to be protective? Those negative thoughts that tell you to stay away from this or that, whatever it is. So yeah. So I think sometimes people think like, well, I have a negative brain, there's something wrong with me. But really, we all kind of have negative brains unless we set an intention to change that and make choices to move in a different direction.
Exactly. And, in Oregon, there's a psilocybin movement, which is very popular and kind of cutting edge in terms of trauma and other things. Ultimately, it's the same thing as old school therapy would do. We're literally building new brains. But, when I went to school, even 22 years ago at Lewis and Clark in Oregon, they were not talking about neurobiology. We did not know we could build a new brain. And so there's this thing called the default mode network, you may be aware of, that's always going to go for efficiency's sake to the old way of doing things, literally just for efficiency. It's not really against us, but the idea that we, at least for a time, have to really swim upstream and beyond even the intention, really integrate change and then maintain it, so that, because that brain is going to, but less over time, but generally it's going to want to revert back, kind of idea, which can be super discouraging if you don't understand. So somebody might come in and go, oh, that was a great session, Catherine. It's like, that's awesome. But if you're not integrating the work that you're doing, or if you're in a relationship, I do a lot of couples work, it'll feel good, but you've got to kind of walk it. I mean, I work with the idea of embodied wakefulness. So it's not about this, I just want this and then I'm exposed to it. It's about it living inside of you and embodying it. So that comes down to practice. That ends up being a bit behavioral, even though I'm not really a behavioralist. That's kind of where that can be reinforced, is through what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, like you said, it is so important to be aware of that, because once you're aware of how the brain works, then I think it's easier to remove that there's something wrong with your brain versus This is just how it's operating. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do.
That's right. That's right. And I love that you make that point so that we're not at odds, just like with a body that won't do what I want it to do, a brain that's telling me these things. It's actually to rock back and have a sense that there is an essence of who we are, that we are not the brain and we are not the body. They are parts of our human existence, but that is such a relief to go, there's something else that coexists with that is clear and present and deeply relaxed. And so it can witness those things and go, oh, there's that brain telling me those stories, and I don't have to believe those stories. The other thing, I don't know if you're aware of Byron Katie's work. She's kind of a spiritual teacher / therapist, but she basically has 4 questions and a turnaround. And she will talk about loving those negative thoughts because if we don't believe them and we don't worship them like gospel, like you say, they're actually opportunities to have a true thought. Because I can go, oh, this is not only not a worth life living, it is such a life worth living, but oh, something was going on for me that needed my attention, and it just kind of came through that thought. So we don't then have to be fighting our mind or scared of it, and like you say, certainly not taking it personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just going off of that, those, you're talking about the questions, but it's so important to, again, if you notice those thoughts, the questions that you ask, and like you're talking about, it's like, what can you learn from that? It's so important versus like, why are you coming at me? Why are you always there? It's so different when you feel like you're the victim of your thoughts versus like, what can you learn from them? It's such a huge perspective change.
That's right. Well, and these ideas psychologically of resistance, and you're a physician, you would know this. So what cortisol level goes on, right? When I'm in resistance to what's going on, it's all connected.
Yeah.
How's my adrenal system doing when I'm, dealing with anxiety to perform because I don't feel good enough, or I'm fighting my mind every day and I'm disconnected from myself and others because of that, and so I think your work includes, right, really becoming holistic about the interconnectedness of all of this. And that not only if we have good health status, that's great, but to realize even subtle versions of unwellness are deeply connected to our psyche and I would say our connection to others. And to your point about the pandemic coming out of that, just like it is so important to know the connection to ourselves and deeply the connection to others, even strangers, and is part of not only just our health and happiness, but our survival in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And going off of that, I'd love to kind of divulge further into that, talking about relationships. I know when people are in like that survival mode and they're constantly in a stress response, the last thing they want to do is put themselves out there to meet people and develop meaningful relationships. Or they may be having relationships that are just detrimental and are hindering them and keeping them stuck. And that can be, I know relationships, and I know is, something I've struggled with, like trying to figure out how to navigate that and, setting the boundaries with the people that are appropriate for boundaries, and also putting yourself out there so you can attract people that can help support you. How would you say someone should start to maybe just bring awareness to what relationships are serving them or not serving them? And then how do they start to kind of change those dynamics so that they can be in an environment that helps them move forward?
Well, I'll layer it a little because there was a lot there.
A lot, yeah.
No, I mean that in a very wonderful way. There's a lot, and again, it's kind of all connected. So if we start with the idea of getting quiet, our intuition, if we're honest, we already know many, many things, like what's healthy, what's not. Am I not having boundaries with this person, so I resent them? Like we can get a pretty good read on where some of our relationships are fraught. The idea of even having boundaries, of course, makes intellectual sense, but you see, if I feel insecure and if I have a boundary with you, Kelly, and I don't know, if I don't have a sense of secure relationship with you, I might not set that boundary. Or if I don't believe I deserve boundaries. That's actually a marker of self-worth. When I work with people and I see them starting to be brave and have boundaries and hold their boundaries and reinforce them in a friendly way. I'm always encouraging, it doesn't have to be angry and hostile, but definitely hold the line. That's because their love and sense of worth has started to really kick in. And what we have to be prepared for is it may be disappointing to someone, but you know what? Disappointment is just a human emotion. People don't die from disappointment. And if I ask you to go to lunch and you say, Catherine, it's not going to work this month, I'm super busy, and I get disappointed, Kelly, isn't that a good problem? Versus I'm so happy you won't have lunch. Like I didn't really want to have lunch with you. I survived that. I'm a grown up. It moves. And if I'm constantly disappointed, or you are, then that's information about that relationship and maybe our compatibility or our availabilities to each other. But we're so afraid of disappointing others as kind of this, like, we have to be pleasing. You got to really sort that before you really just start having boundaries, because it's very intense for people to do that. Being our authentic self is kind of an extension of that. So if I had masks on as a way to have people like me, choose me, not reject me, if I hadn't done the work around my father, I'd be afraid of abandonment, then I'd be kind of codependent. Well, would I be authentic? I'm not going to take chances. My authenticity is great if I get everybody's approval for it, but authenticity sometimes means, I say something that's not what anybody else is at that point, a perspective that's not shared, or again, I might have a boundary, or let an aspect of myself out, or like I'm doing with you, share something that is really vulnerable, what's happened to me along my life journey. So once we have a relationship to ourselves and we can have a loving invitation to others to be with us, but only with the standard that I am going to be my authentic self. And then we can either disappoint people or ultimately say, if they don't choose in, then that is not right relationship for me. That's how I would layer all those things. If somebody's having trouble in their relationship, I believe in accountability work strongly from a place of kindness. So I would just get quiet and see, what am I bringing to the table that's part of this dynamic, and then to see still what's left over after that. In my work, I teach communication and repair and collaboration at the relational level. I developed 3 tools because people don't have a structure around that. And if we don't have a family of origin that had conscious communication and knew how to be skillful with it, or didn't know how to repair injuries, we're just kind of feeling our way through relationships versus, oh, this was hard, but we're going to navigate it. Like literally giving people navigation tools. Then fewer relationships are like unsustainable to us or untenable, because we can do our part of the work, and then we can bring good skills and processes to the table with another when that's called for.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many things you said there I just love, but I feel like an overall theme of what you're saying, again, that self-discovery, self-understanding, self-worth, it all starts again with ourselves. And then now we have a better core to make some of these decisions or take some of these actions that doesn't feel like we're just rocking this huge boat and it's this big fear thing. So I just love that, where we feel like we're secure enough in ourselves, and now we can start taking these actions or doing what we need to create a life around us that matches that. So I love all that. Yeah.
And it's kind of trust work because, I've been in a committed relationship a long time, but I have a lot of clients and adult children who are single and navigating that world of trusting your intuition, working with loneliness so that loneliness does not drive lowering the bar to who would be right and compatible for oneself. Doesn't mean that it's not an important emotion, because my loneliness would say maybe I do need to connect with others more strongly and or more deeply. But to really know that if you put, for example, in a profile, like really, really show who you are. Yeah, you might cancel out 60% of the people. And yet eventually, if you aren't, you're going to either be yourself in that relationship, or you would now be incentivized never to fully be yourself in that relationship, because the operating premise was who you presented initially. But just being willing to, again, practice a kind of bravery. But if I'm okay with me, I don't need you to choose me or be okay with me. And there's kind of an idea of law of attraction. We attract through the radiance of self-acceptance and love and peace and wellness, presence. That's pretty, that draws a lot of good stuff in.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in that. And again, it's just, if we raise our vibration, we attract people to have higher vibrations, and then you resonate with each other. So it's beautiful. And it again, just comes back to that own care and own work on ourselves. It's beautiful. One thing I want to, I know you talk about like wakefulness, and I was wondering if you could just talk about wakefulness and like how it relates to wellness, because that again, just bringing that connection together, because I'm a huge, I love the mind body connection. So the more we can kind of integrate this and make this very well known that everything is interconnected. I'd love to talk, if you could talk on that.
Yeah. So my definition of wakefulness, and I am a little annoyed that since I published my book and have always loved that word, has become kind of a woke, the whole political thing. Look like, I just want to like, there's a whole nother beautiful way to think of this word. Even like my wake up call to change careers was just this, like, it's really the idea of there is a conscious self that we were born with, that lives within us, that can be feel pretty distant. It can, we do have a shadow self as well at the human level. We have an ego we have to contend with. So the idea of wakefulness and wellness, and I don't think of it just as a physical phenomenon, wellness, is about listening deeply and trusting. And I believe, and I've always known this, that what I need to know about this being is being cued so much, whether it's an emotional cue, a physical cue, a relational cue, but I have to be willing to listen to that cue. So being asleep is, I'm just on autopilot, going through the motions in my patterns. Being awake is an honesty. And it's also, again, thinking that there's kind of a higher self. There's my most conscious self. And we're all on a path, probably till we die, of becoming our most conscious self, how we live, how we love. But that's how I would define it. So if we get quiet, we will know, the inner knowing will know. Like Catherine Nini, I've run for almost 50 years. At some point, there may be a point at which that my body says, which will be, I will grieve because I love running. Catherine, we need to be done now. If I have body image stuff, or if my identity is too attached to being a runner, I'm gonna go to sleep to that flirt. Or if I'm wakeful, and if I trust, and if I listen, and then if I respond to what I hear accordingly, that to me, so it's really kind of comes with our system. If we can, I don't know, tap into it, maybe would be a phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, it's so important to have that moment of just quiet and not quiet that we're still scrolling on our phone, but just genuinely just sitting there and being with ourselves. Yeah. And I would just challenge anybody who's listening to this, how much time in the last week have you actually done that? Because I think there's a lot of people that probably can't even say 10 minutes in the last week, because we're always trying to fill our time. Yeah.
Well, and the restlessness, from the tradition, I don't know if this was ever, or you teach this or was taught to you, but surf the urge, which is about not purging, right? That comes from disordered eating. That's where I actually picked up on that, but I use that all the time in lots of contexts of like, surf the urge to pick up that phone, surf the urge to go think of something to do. And if you can, like, again, the brain is so responsive, it doesn't take that long and very many attempts to begin to teach it to quiet. And what I do before each session is to offer kind of a mindfulness moment. And I have people start with their breath, and then they kind of drop into their body. So the idea that even if I love my body, I might be living shoulders up, thinking and doing, rather than being and feeling. So that's one thing. But then the next thing I say is about this surf. I say, so as you are just staying with your breath, as your mind starts wandering and looking for a problem to solve, looking for something to do, that's what our lovely mind does. It's very old brain kind of stuff. We just put our arm around that mind and we just gently place it right, our attention back on our breath. So it's like you're gonna get bored, you're gonna feel antsy, and then that will shift. So hang in there for the shift. And what I see over time, and I end, by the way, with a third piece before you open your eyes, just in your inner world, connect with yourself, not with an agenda and not with any conditions for loving yourself. And even when you open your eyes and we start our session, feel the tethering to you. So it's almost an attachment piece to self. And people open their eyes, Kelly, and we just started, and they look like, I don't know, they look brighter. They look younger, they look more and they smile, and I'm like, and we didn't even change anything in your life.
Yes.
And something different. And it was 4 minutes. It wasn't 40 minutes. It wasn't a meditation retreat that cost $2,000. It was 4 minutes.
Yep.
And then if your outer world is tricky right now, maybe you have a tough relationship, maybe you've got to change your job, maybe you have a difficult child, you are so much more resourced just with that deeper dive into kind of that groundedness that I'm calling mindfulness with you today. So
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I totally know what you're talking about, because I've seen that too with people I worked with. And it's like that quick, you can like see the transition happening. And it is like that they have a different energy. They present differently. They speak differently. Their eyes look different. And it's like their whole system has just transitioned into this like more relaxed state. And
that's right. That's right. And even though people are not angry or seem that anxious, I do see that at that polyvagal level of that's a shift into relaxation response. And even though they don't think they're in fight or flight, a lot of people live in fight or flight. So they normalize that. I think our culture has normalized that. Absolutely. And then it's just going from not 0 to 60, but 30 to 60. When I really get upset or really get anxious, you were already at baseline, not at ground zero. And so, right, having that shift. And again, you can do 2 or 3 minutes in the shower. Like if it's like, I don't have time for mindfulness, it's like, actually you do. Yeah. You do. Because there's moments where you're out not doing anything else. I mean, try to have not too much hot water, I guess, if we're trying to be conservative, with water supply, but yeah. And just helping people, like, I think what you're trying to do is find that next bridge where it's not, oh, I have to love myself today. Well, I don't love myself today. So that day is lost. Okay. But what can I do? What's the one next thing I can do? And there's always a next thing we can do. Absolutely. I don't do meditation. I want calmness. It's like, okay, shower, or before you when you wake up with your first cup of coffee is actually when I take I do my own 3 minutes with myself every day before I do it with my clients. So yeah.
Yeah. It's so important. And just building into your regular system. It's not like this life overhaul, but it's like, let's just do one little thing different. And I find what most people experience is that they do it and they're like, oh, I kind of like that. And then they want to do it. It's not like, right. They enjoy that part of their day, and then it just becomes a catalyst for change, and it's just giving yourself that opportunity. It's huge.
Exactly. And because some of the people I've worked with a little bit longer, they've been doing this mindfulness for some time. And what's so beautiful to see, Kelly, is they kind of don't, what began as I can't stand being in here inside of me. It's so flooded. It's so critical. I'm so restless and bored, is I don't want to come out. So they'll open their eyes and I'm like, you can go back. I mean, we'll do our thing now because that's why you're here, but always go back. And so I don't know what my life is ahead of me. I know at some point I will take my last breath. I love the idea that I am with me and beautiful others in my life for sure. But I am with me in a way I was never, even before my trauma. I wasn't old enough to develop this, but for whatever is heading my way. And I've just had in the last month, a couple of really intense things, road testing all this work. And it's like, it is there. It is a solid thing. I'm grateful for that. The work works. And your dedication to what you're doing, contribution to the planet, what I'm trying to do really, and have it be affordable and have it be within reach and not some high level aspiration that feels impossible is wonderful.
100%. I can agree. It's huge. And the beauty of it is you have everything that you need right within yourself for all this. Like it's right there. You don't have to go buy fancy equipment or anything. Like you have it right with you at all times, which is it's beautiful.
Yes, that's right.
And I completely agree. It's like, once you start getting into it, it's like, it just comes more naturally. You don't meet that resistance that you feel in the beginning. Like in the beginning, it is challenging. I mean, there were literally years I tried to meditate and I was like, oh, I don't like this. Cause I was that negative, constantly, chatter in my brain. I'm like, this doesn't work for me. And I would give up and then I would try it again because I knew the benefits. And it took me some time to be consistently work through those barriers. And it really does make a huge difference once you get through that.
Yeah. And every time we do something, we literally build a new neural pathway. Again, now we know that. And so that is innately hopeful. That is just profoundly hopeful for people. And, even I think it's Sting who wrote that Brand New Day song years ago of so you're having a bad day. Okay. That day starts at 4:00. I was raising children. I have 6 children. So I was pretty intensely overwhelmed at different times with the children. And it's just kind of never over. It's okay, maybe it's 9:00 at night and that's when I start my day. But again, if I deep breaths, if I can kind of understand I am not just lost in this, that there's some kind of core empowerment, resilience, but even more than just survivalistic resilience that we can tap into. That's what I say in my meditation is you're creating new neural pathways here. But this sense of a deep center, a deep quiet, a deep calm lives within you. And so you don't have to stress about trying to feel calm. It's more just sinking into it kind of idea. But I'm glad for you that you put in the time and kept going back. It sounds like give it more chance.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a battle. It's in the beginning. It's tough. I found it very challenging, but for anyone who feels like they're in that spot, I hope you just continue with it because I stuck with it and it really does make a huge difference. And now, again, integrating these tools and just like you said, you have these with you and now you are more resilient. You are wiring yourself every day to move you forward than to be kind of stuck maybe in a place you don't want to be. And that's the beauty of it is that we're always growing. We always have the capacity to grow and really dive into our authentic self and where we're destined to be. So it's a beautiful process and a journey.
And when we can meet our own pain with the kind of love, Kelly, we were speaking of, even a tough day is a day of love. Because where we start, whether it's a feeling of pain, because we have some loss or trauma we've never fully metabolized, whether it's a thought, is not where we stop. That's the starting place, not the ending place. And these inner out of the wheelhouse of the inner tools and practices, much less those outer ones, which interestingly actually transfer. How do I forgive myself? Well, Catherine, you did something unconscious. So why don't you repair that with yourself? I had to do a lot of inner repair with me about my body because I hurt my body a lot. Even some of my running until now was hurting my body. And so, having this idea that there's the inner world is maybe in a way more dynamic and interesting, not from a narcissistic standpoint, but we're coached to think that's the outer world. I was what's out there to discover, which is awesome. But boy,
it is. But there's so much more within us that changes our outer world. Once we change our inner world, then our outer world changes, and it's to create that. It's amazing.
Right. And it's a tough time on the planet right now. And I can tell you is, it's gone from the personal, relational / family to it's really hard to deal with, how it feels around climate. It's really hard to be in a time politically that feels intense and can be divisive. I don't want to give that message because I don't agree with that as a simplified message, but it can be divisive. It's to stay on the planet right now and be healthy and connected and hopeful and expansive and not do a spiritual bypass, not do a just like la 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 la, I just won't pay attention to it. We can't really get away with that anyway. A part of us always is tracking what's going on. So that means we have to really lean into sometimes and feel into emotionally the hard stuff so that we can then also feel our joy and our contentment and our happiness. We've got to then feel scared. We've got to grieve what we need to grieve. We've got to own our anger if we're angry, so that I have a temper or have had a temper, so that I don't unconsciously do something dangerous with it because I'm trying to push it down, and then it comes out in a passive aggressive way or an unregulated way. So even though it's not only about emotions, like our walk with the outer world seems now to be more for my clients, my children, myself, about working with new dynamics that are kind of present and emerging.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such an important message there, because it's a tumultuous world right now. There's a lot going on, and it's more important than ever to take those moments for yourself so that you can navigate it in a way that is empowering and not feeling like you're a victim to what's going on around you. It's so important.
Well, and again, what would the chemical download be to a state of helplessness? But yet when it's like, what can the individual do with some of this stuff? And if you can't leave the country, or if you now don't have enough money for, like, how you really work with where you are right now. Again, mindfulness is not bliss. Mindfulness is truth serum. So but we're way safer to deal with hard things. And where do we go from here? But to have the bravery of like being fully present. And then, the differences we make also then show up in our own system, of course, and small world. But I would offer that many things make big mountains, and that it is not useless or just a feel-good day. I did my part. I picked up some litter. It matters. And that's the message I try to give people, that, you're not corporate America. You can't do some of the biggest heavy lifting, but not only for your own well-being, so you're not living in learned helplessness or a sense of helplessness and disempowerment, but also for its actual contributions and for the hope it gives. If you don't give up, then I don't give up, then we don't give up. And that's so critical right now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Such a beautiful message, because what you said exactly. I think sometimes people think that, like, well, what do I do? What does that matter? It matters tremendously. Like, it's a ripple effect. The things that you do are going to impact your immediate people, who will impact more people. And it just continues on. If we all do our part of working on ourselves, I mean, it just continues. And you never know what that one little thing that you said to somebody, what that could do for their day or their life. I mean, I think back, like, it was like 12 years ago, I was on campus and it was a rough day. And this guy just said something really sweet to me that walked by, and he just kept going. I still remember that. So, like, those little things make an impact.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. My husband and I over the weekend were out and it was, that everybody's understaffed now. So you're going to wait longer. And I have not been always the kindest nor most patient person. So when this person next was turned and said, "You guys are really patient," it's like, okay, wow, that's great. And the staff person, the wait staff, she's like, "You're being really kind." It's like, well, it's not your fault. The food is not coming. And what's the alternative? But that's noticed, and we get those moments that we are making a difference all the time. And even if we're not doing something egregious, just the numbing out, like I'm in my own world, versus the smile at a stranger across the street. Again, that's going to change our system, that we're so understanding how interconnected we all are, and we need to be each other's keepers. But I love your story that you remember that. That's exactly how it works.
Yeah. It's just, those little things make a tremendous difference. But just the energy that you put out, that, even just what you're talking about, like, you were putting out this like patient accepting energy in that moment, and people were noticing. And then maybe they took that home and said, the next time they go out to dinner and they're waiting, like, you know what, why does it pay to get angry? Like, okay, I'll accept this and just kind of be more patient.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and I have that pet peeve around drivers. It's like, if you're going to go out and eat in our culture right now, we have a labor crisis. So just just, you know, dial it in like
Yeah.
life on life's terms. If you're going to drive, there's more traffic sometimes.
Mhm.
Don't
Yeah.
be out there. Like, that's the realist in me of, but again, is that really about, I'm upset because my Brussels sprouts didn't come, or is my stress getting displaced?
Yeah.
And again, is why everyday wellness is so critical, so that we don't contaminate the relationships and the environments around us, obviously accidentally, but nonetheless can still happen. Just taking real ownership of what's happening inside.
Yes, so important. And is so true, just to differentiate like what's going on deeper that may be coming out in a way that, you know,
that's right,
is not the actual issue.
That's right. We recently have decided to live in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so I am really noticing nervous systems in that culture. My nervous system, which I've worked very, very hard to, it's much more grounded and calmer than in the day. And yet, and the term that just keeps coming to me, Kelly, is they just don't internalize stress. They don't have a perfect culture. No culture is perfect. They still have traffic, or they have storms where there's crazy rain. But you see, I have not seen internalized stress in the same way. So of course, then there's not hostility. There's just not this energy and reactivity. It's really beautiful to see. I think that's where it's like, how do I get that state where life is, of course, happening and has its challenges. And I will have my influence, but I don't have control. But how do I protect this nervous system and overall psyche from internalizing all that hard, like you say, tumultuous stuff?
Yeah. And I do find the more work you do on yourself, the more protective you are of it. So you're not going to be someone who just like lets somebody who drains you in your life. You're not going to be someone who reacts to everything, because you're like, I've worked so hard on this every single day that like, this is more valuable to me than reacting right now.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And that, you know, if we actually have something to say, and I say this in the club of reactors, like I am very humbled by my own temper and what it took to quiet that temper. What I learned early on in my life, but it wasn't a very sophisticated message, is express yourself. Well, Catherine was expressing herself in a way that was reactive and dominating and very misattuned, not reading the room at all. And so it wasn't as simple as just to express myself. Of course, have your voice, but it's also about an idea of, if I really want you to hear me, Kelly, if I'm reactive, your system, or especially if I'm unregulated, your system's going to start shutting down. Your brain can't even take in everything I'm saying. But I really want you, you know, and so the whole thing about, again, this mindfulness, so that we can express ourselves in a way that actually lands, that people are receptive to the very thing that wants to beautifully, you know, be offered from us. So what we're speaking of today is so critical for how we exist in the world, how we exist in our relationships, that are just blinders some of us have and then we wonder why this friend is distanced, or we feel lonely, or we feel disconnected, or we do know and we think it's about us, but then we just beat ourselves up and get into self-criticism about it.
100%. Yeah. Or why we have, you know, this health condition that keeps replaying, or, you know, there's so many things that pop up when our nervous system is in a place of survival and dysregulation.
Exactly.
So many things can be impacted. I mean, there's so many, it's such, like you said, such a valuable thing to share, and especially both our experiences, but share, and for people hopefully listening to take and integrate it into their lives. Like, what's one little thing you can do to move your life forward in a way that you can feel that inner joy with yourself?
That's right.
For people that want to connect with you, how can they find you?
Well, if they want to be part of a wakefulness community, just an email I send out. It's now about just 4 times a year, and I don't give that to anybody. Then I did something on nature. I've done stuff. I mean, it's pieces from my book, pieces from my practice. That's one way. My practice is running pretty full, so I'm not really taking new clients, and I'm deeply grateful for that. But certainly if they resonate with these messages, my book is on Amazon, River to Ocean, Living in the Flow of Wakefulness. Yeah. And but shoot me an email if you have stuff online, just to connect. And you know, just we're all, I like to think of it as we're all on this path together. And I don't know who your listeners are, but I'm just holding this idea of they're all these beloved souls and humans trying to make their way in this dynamic, powerful world. And we really are all in this together. So
absolutely. Yeah, beautifully said. And it's so true. And you just, you know, I know so many messages that you've shared today will hit home to many people and hopefully move their life in a different trajectory.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Kelly, so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you for spending your precious time to listen to this episode of Rewiring Health. My mission is to inspire hope and healing through science-backed practices. If you found value in this, please share with 3 people and leave a review. By doing so, this message can be spread to those who need to hear it most. Also, to get updates on the most recent episodes, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for being part of this community, and I am forever grateful for you.